Well, welcome back. This is presentation 4 of the media and political information. We've been talking about different things that that the media does. They have a storytelling imperative. There are a number of ways in which the media can kind of frame and set the tone for how a story is told. And framing refers again to the ability of the media to influence how events and issues are interpreted and understood. And that includes decisions about what information to exclude or exclude, to include or exclude. So, for example, during the 2016 presidential election, the media's decision to frame the Clinton campaign through the prism of her use of a private email server while she was serving as Secretary of State put her campaign at a significant disadvantage, one that she was not able to overcome. And part of that was, some of that you can say is the media's fault, but some of it is simply the Clinton campaign's fault. They simply were not talented enough. She was not talented enough as a campaigner to really overcome that. Likewise, the decision by FBI Director James Comey to reopen the email investigation in the 2016, just days before the November election, lent greater weight to her rival, to Clinton's rival, Donald Trump. And fed his characterization of her as crooked Hillary. Clinton believes to this day that the media's framing of the 2016 campaign contributed to her defeat. And I think she's right, but I also think that she has her own share of the blame to take as well. She simply was not as talented a candidate as her husband. I think she would have been better off staying in the Senate. I think she'd probably be a widely regarded senator today if she had stayed in. Priming is also very important. Priming is the process of making some criteria more important than others when evaluating a politician, problem, or issue. For example, right now, the priming of the 2024 race is, from the mainstream media, is focusing on Biden's age. That is the prism through which they look. Sometimes elected officials, and especially presidents, can work to prime the pump to ensure that their preferred issues receive more coverage. Right now, Democrats are trying to prime the abortion issue. They're trying to get the abortion issue, front and center because they believe a majority of Americans support their position and are disturbed by the Supreme Court's recent, in 2022, striking down of Roe versus Wade. Many analysts believe that the 2020 election amounted to a kind of national referendum on incumbent President Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. To that extent, again, priming has this kind of retrospective quality to it. And a lot of people looked at Trump's handling and said, well, he really was not very effective because he was trying to characterize the campaign in a way that absolved him of any responsibility. Journalists can shape political news. American media has a bias towards official sources. In other words, members of Congress, executive branch agency heads, administration officials, and so forth. The media also reports stories from corporations, interest groups, nonprofit organizations, and other political actors who will seek to draw attention to issues and to tell their side of the story. So again, the disclosure of confidential, government information in the form of leaks is one of those things that result from this reliance on official sources. And some leaks can reflect factional infighting within the executive branch, and some leaks will come in the form of whistleblowers, which are lower level officials who are seeking to publicize what they view as sort of wrong-headed or corrupt or improper activities. Daniel Ellsberg his leak of the Pentagon Papers is a good example of an administration whistleblowing. And if you don't know what the Pentagon Papers are, this was a history related to U.S. involvement in Vietnam that had been commissioned by the Defense Department, and Ellsberg had participated as a member of the Rand Corporation as an external group analyzing the United States involvement in Vietnam, and and the Pentagon Papers were damning in basically saying that the United States was not winning the war, and the Nixon administration did not want that information to become public. Trump impeachment 1.0. This was an example of a whistleblower who exposed potential misconduct by Donald Trump in a July 25th, 2019 telephone call between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The whistleblower alleged that President Trump had sought to pressure Zelensky to open a corruption investigation into former Vice President and likely Democratic challenger Joe Biden. And he was threatening to withhold $400 million in U.S. military aid to Ukraine in the event that Zelensky didn't comply. If you're not aware, even then, the Ukraine was fighting what was at the time a civil war between Russian separatists in the eastern part of the country and the rest of Ukraine. Major news outlets subsequently reported that military aid to Ukraine had been appropriated by Congress and was being deliberately withheld by the Trump administration. Trump was subsequently impeached by the House of Representatives on December 18th, 2019 on 2 articles of impeachment: the abuse of power and obstruction of justice, obstruction of Congress. And the Republican-controlled Senate. I was actually at the first day of that impeachment. I got to sit in the gallery. It was awesome. But the Republican-controlled Senate voted largely along partisan lines to acquit President Trump on February 5th, 2020. Only one Republican senator, Utah Senator Mitt Romney, supported the first impeachment article that Trump had engaged in abuse of power. Okay, moving on. Adversarial journalism reflects the increasing kind of separation between journalists and politicians. Journalists increasingly have incentives to be seen kind of harshly criticizing and holding politicians accountable. And again, that reflects an aggressive model of reporting in which journalists adopt oppositional and combative styles of reporting to expose wrongdoing. For much of the 20th century, presidents reached out directly to the press and strengthened the office of the presidency in its relationship with Congress by cultivating friendly relationships with journalists. The Vietnam War shattered the largely cooperative relationship between the presidency and the press. And of course, the media, there were central driving figures in exposing the Watergate, scandal. Again, Donald Trump's single term of office intensified the increasingly conflictual relationship between the office, the institution of the presidency, and the press. Regulation of the media is limited. In the United States, the print and online media are essentially free from government interference. Broadcast radio and television are regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. In recent decades, deregulation efforts have steadily eroded the federal government's regulatory capacity over the media, and the FCC has used its limited regulatory authorities to impose rules governing political content. If you look recently, Congress is attempting to ban TikTok, which is a social media platform that relies on algorithms to it's kids taking videos of themselves doing strange things. And again, the question is, you're balancing things. TikTok is owned by a Chinese company. It's largely viewed that the Chinese government has access to that data. And there are real questions as to whether TikTok is a secure form of communication. And so there has been a movement afoot for the last several years, either to ban it or to compel the Chinese company to sell it to an American company. And again, it does raise serious First Amendment questions that we have to be kind of aware of. The Fairness Doctrine, this was an important regulatory principle that was adopted by the Federal Communications Commission in 1949. Basically, it meant that broadcasters airing programs on controversial issues, political issues, were required to provide time for opposing viewpoints. The Fairness Doctrine also mandated that TV and radio stations cover controversial issues of public and social importance. While the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the Fairness Doctrine in 1969, by 1987, the Federal Communications Commission under the Reagan administration had formally revoked it. Advocates of deregulation argued there was no need for the Federal Fairness Doctrine because diversity of viewpoints was present without the need for regulation. And again, this is what I said earlier about opening the door to people like Rush Limbaugh. Critics argued that the elimination of the Fairness Doctrine opened the door to openly one-sided and partisan programming that has contributed mightily to partisan polarization. So, media and democracy, what do you think? While freedom of the press is essential to democratic governance, how can the media do its job of comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable if significant percentages of Americans reject their reporting? The rise of digital media has fundamentally changed how political information is gathered and distributed. How do you think social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter should be subject? Do you think people, groups like Facebook and Twitter should be subject to more aggressive government regulation? What is your news gathering strategy? Do you attempt to confirm stories from multiple independent sources before accepting a story as fact? What media sources today play the role of watchdog over government? Do you view such fact checks as biased or unbiased? Why? These are important questions, so I hope you think about them carefully. When we come back, we are going to move on to the next important subject, which again are political parties and interest groups.